Okay, welcome back everybody to the Real World Podcast. This is another edition of the Tape Crusaders. My name is Matt Waters. I am your main host and I'm the first one that talks normally. But we all know why we're here. To hear the opinions of the incomparable Mike Thomas from across the Atlantic, straight out of the US of A. Mike, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm tired.
He's tired, like America generally.
Yeah, things keep happening and they're all awful.
There has been a relentless onslaught of things happening lately.
There's like legit Nazis in the cabinet of the United States now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, there are.
At least in the senior White House staff, maybe not the cabinet yet. I have to verify the amount of Nazis in the cabinet.
Okay. I will ask you every edition of this to confirm how many Nazis you have found in the cabinet. We'll make
Nazis.
Yeah.
And then I'll do my Brad Pitt Nazis impression, and then we'll move on through the use of humor.
Yeah, there'll be like a jingle for it every time. We'll be like, and now Mike with Nazi Watch. And then we'll go to you. Something like that.
Still just one, Matt.
Still just one. Okay, back to you. Small talk achieved. Let's talk Batman. There's a little film called The Dark Knight. It's quite popular. Don't know if you've heard of it.
It made a bit of a splash at one point.
It did, slightly. I claimed, largely, to pull headlines in the description, that we declared Batman Begins to be better than The Dark Knight, if only slightly. I know that isn't actually fully representative of our shared opinion, as you've called it a 1A, 1B scenario. I'm going to stick with it after my rewatch. I will stress again, it's only slightly. I'm not saying one is good and one is bad. But yeah, that's my hot take to start off with, is that while The Dark Knight has higher highs, Batman Begins is a more focused, complete picture. What you got? Hit me back.
I think it's two films are very hard to compare because I think they're telling such different stories with some similar ideas about justice and all that, but largely it feels like two very, very different stories. One feels, like you said, one is definitely more focused. Does that focus make it inherently better? I don't know. But I think regardless of which one is better or not, which is somewhat of a debate that's not even entirely needed.
No.
I think what's pretty unclear is, based on the vision established in Batman Begins, this is a more than worthy follow-up to that in a way that few sequels have ever been, probably. I mean, when you think about sequels, this feels like a genuine part two in the story of Batman. It feels like a genuine part two of a larger story, as opposed to, let's say, an Iron Man 2 or a Spider-Man 2 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2. This feels much more Empire, Two Towers, Godfather Part 2, in the sense that this is where the characters are now.
Yeah, it's certainly...
with some wrinkles thrown in, obviously.
Yeah, while feeling somewhat detached from it, and I was actually surprised by how different it feels. I mean, it's the same people, or a lot of the same people. It's the same director, but it does feel very separate from it. But while also building naturally on what was set up, like it narratively checks out. It feels like a very natural progression of what was started and Begins.
There's a little bit of an Alien and Aliens element to it. I think in this one the tone is very similar. But like with Alien is a horror movie, and Aliens is not really a horror movie as much as an action movie.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And that's pretty. I mean, it's not like I'm breaking news there with that take, but it's a fairly basic opinion now. But there's Batman Begins feels far more like a hero's journey. Yes. Origin story. Dark Knight feels kind of more like a crime story. A heist story in a way, even though there's not really a heist going on, but
high stakes action. There is a heist going on in the first sort of 5 minutes, and that's quite a scene.
The stories they tell are inherently different in so many ways. Of course, that happens a lot. Obviously the origins, the first story of a superhero franchise is almost always going to be origin story. Unfortunately, the second one sometimes can often feel like a retread, and even with non-superhero movies, just in the I think. The biggest and most valid criticism of Star Trek After Darkness is that it felt like Kirk went through literally the exact same arc as he did in the first one. Just, spoiler, instead of a dead dad, he had a dead captain. I know. This feels like okay, now we're taking the story, the characters in new directions. We're not just retreading what we did, but we're also keeping the tone similar so it doesn't feel disconnected. But I don't know. It's kind of like I think it's the perfect balance in that way.
This is how you do a sequel.
If only more directors felt influenced by The Dark Knight in some way.
Or felt influenced influenced by the right aspects.
Yeah.
Or were, mentally capable of interpreting things. So yeah, this is The Dark Knight. It's a big old sequel that cost $185 million, which, that's a lot of money. But Begins cost $150, so it's not the biggest jump in budget in the world, and it brought in $1 billion, making it the 6th highest grossing film in the US, only 27th worldwide, which is crazy to me, and by far the highest grossing film of 2008, which is when it came out.
Something I've noticed with those worldwide trends is sometimes it often feels like it's the next film that does big business overseas. Well, what I had just read actually was that, at least at the time, I don't know updated stats, but in terms of fastest to 200 million, it was that Spider-Man 3 and Dead Man's Chest, which I think is interesting because Pirates of the Caribbean and Spider-Man 2 were pretty beloved in a way that I don't even think Batman Begins was. I feel like Dark Knight was truly, its financial success was truly a product of word of mouth and marketing in terms of that immediate financial success. Pirates of the Caribbean and Spider-Man hit the public in a way that Batman Begins never did. The Dark Knight its success feels truly organic, is what I should say. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Massive phenomenon. Huge marketing campaign. Viral websites, a fictional newspaper, lots of teasers and trailers, a big scavenger hunt. They sent birthday cakes with phones inside them to multiple media outlets that caused genuine bomb scares. So, ill-conceived slightly, but spending the money, getting the word out there. And as I said last time, I remember seeing the trailer for the first time and thinking this is a big deal. I remember everyone I know freaking out. This is coming, the Joker's in it. Everyone freak out. An enormous sort of event in film history.
Yeah, it felt like a big deal.
It did. So to set the landscape a little bit, so we've got Christopher Nolan coming back to direct. He was initially undecided, but the idea of doing a Joker story got him back. And while last time we had David Goyer, he did write treatments for 2 sequels, 2 Begins, and he did write the first draft of The Dark Knight, and he was very inspired by The Long Halloween, and a lot of that is still evident if you've read that book in this film. But he didn't actually write the script. The final one, that was Christopher's brother, Jonathan Nolan, and Christopher himself. And they took inspiration from all kinds of places and were sort of doing these mandatory screenings of films for the cast, stuff like Heat and all kinds of stuff, Citizen Kane, you name it, they think it's an influence. After several years, we got The Dark Knight. Kind of de facto Batman for an entire generation of people. These are the takes on these characters. Not saying that some of that isn't deserving. I think several of these characters are the best iterations of them, but just this film, enormous impact. The amount of stuff with Heath Ledger's face on it that is available for purchase since this film came out is staggering. The number of kids who, Why So Serious written somewhere cannot overstate how big this film was.
And kind of instantly viewed as a classic.
Yes.
Which I think was kind of interesting.
You don't get a lot of that these days.
No. I don't know. I don't feel like there's been a film like this since. That's kind of taken on a life of its own, that was viewed both critically and in a fan way as everything you'd ever want, basically.
Yeah. New Star Wars did enormous numbers and hype and everything, but I don't think people came away from it going, that's like the best shit ever.
No. People felt like they were watching something new here, in a way, an original. Even if it's very directly based on an existing comic book property, openly talks about its influences from films like Heat, things like that. Especially, I think in terms of the look of the film, there's a sense of Heat. There's a slight retro look to the film that's slightly less shiny than what a lot of modern films look like, which is also just in part of the fact that it's, once again, almost all practical effects. Even that giant truck flipping over, which was awesome.
Yeah, it was. I think almost everything except for Harvey's face.
Yeah, that's CGI, and
I think Batman doing the dive off the building. They plotted it all out and shot it for real in different locations to see how it would look, but then they practically couldn't do that in Hong Kong, so they had to CG it.
And then the money that turned into fire.
Yes.
Based on what I just saw,
that's not safe.
It looked pretty. It looked pretty CGI. It didn't it bad, but it looked like CGI. But this movie felt like a big deal. It mostly holds up.
It does.
Almost a decade later, and you feel like you're still watching something cutting edge. You still feel like you're watching something that no one has really let pass in any way, or even I don't even think has anyone really reached it in something like this. Big action films, comic book films, big blockbusters.
Nah.
Like Avatar had the money, Star Wars had the love. I don't think any of them have really.
Jurassic World made a lot of money.
It blew my mind at how much money that made just based on the quality. Because it felt like word of mouth had to be zero. I can't. It was hard for me to picture anyone truly thinking it was good. It seems like so many things are attempting to be important or bigger than life, and few actually get there.
Yes.
Wow, Finding Dory is the 7th all-time domestic gross. That's astounding to me.
Yeah. Being someone who was in film school while this film came out, this was talked about quite a lot, and I know a lot of people who are incredibly unhealthily obsessed with this film. I can't judge them too much. If you're going to be obsessed with a film, this is one of the better ones that has ever been made, so fair enough.
But yeah, so what is this film about, Matt?
There's a guy called Bruce Wayne. His parents were killed, so he stays perpetually a child and then gets big and muscular and skilled and becomes a vigilante called Batman because the law can't do anything about the corruption of Gotham. And Batman saves everyone all the time and has gadgets that repel sharks. But specifically in this film, so it's set 9 months after Batman Begins, which seems a short amount of time to me, but hey. Maybe it's 9 months after that rooftop scene that we couldn't agree on how long had passed after. Either way, 9 months after Batman Begins. So crime in Gotham is generally falling, with criminals shown to be afraid to operate at night because of Batman and Rachel Dawes. And the new district attorney, Harvey Dent, are working tirelessly to incarcerate big mob players, and it's leading to some actual change. However, things take a turn when the mysterious Joker approaches the heads of the crime families of Gotham and offers to kill Batman in return for half of their money. He kills Commissioner Loeb, he kills a judge, and he makes attempts on the lives of Harvey Dent and the mayor, and apparently kills Jim Gordon, but no one actually believes that Jim Gordon is dead. While Bruce is sort of contemplating giving up his life as Batman because of the good that Harvey's doing so that he can be with Rachel, he works alongside Gordon and Dent to capture the Joker, who reveals he has Rachel and Harvey in his custody. And Batman is very frustrated by how ineffective his methods are against the Joker, which is something we will talk about. He's given their addresses, he races to rescue Rachel, but of course finds it's instead Harvey. He narrowly saves him from the explosion, but it burns half his face while Rachel dies on the other side of town. Bruce is naturally very depressed. Joker escapes, and he goes and visits Harvey Dent, who is now quite literally Two-Face, because half his face is burnt off. Puts a gun in his hand and basically encourages him to go take his justice. And then, not content to stop there, he takes the whole of Gotham hostage, implying he's placed bombs on the bridges and tunnels, which causes everyone to mount up on ferries to try and get out. But he has, of course, foreseen all of this, despite claiming he isn't a big planner. And there's bombs on each ferry, and they're basically tasked with one has to blow the other up, or he will blow them both up. Batman finds him using scary, realistic surveillance equipment that the government could very well be using at this very moment. He takes Joker down. The ships don't kill each other, which seems to genuinely shock the Joker. But Two-Face has been murdering a lot of people, and he has Jim Gordon's family, his hostage, and Batman intervenes just before he can kill them, and he knocks him to his apparent death. But because they know the effect that this will have on the city's morale, Batman assumes public responsibility for the deaths of the men killed by Harvey and disappears into the night as Jim Gordon gives an overly long monologue to his young son who probably doesn't understand what he's talking about.
In all likelihood, for sure. That is the film.
Not that much shorter than the film itself, which runs at 2.5 hours, my synopsis there.
It does. It doesn't feel like 2.5 hours, though. It feels like the right length, actually, to me, for the story they choose to tell. I think we have to focus on the most important character in this story, which is, of course, Harvey Dent.
Yes. No two ways about that.
This movie sinks or swims on the back of Harvey Dent. Without Harvey Dent, this film is a complete... Without a great performance, without a great execution of character, without an excellent planned out arc for Harvey Dent, this movie's spine kind of falls apart, and then the rest of the movie kind of falls apart. Yeah. So we got to start there. What did you think of Harvey Dent in this film?
Aaron Eckhart is a wonderful actor. He won his role in this film allegedly based off one of my favourite films of all time, Thank You for Smoking. I think he's better as Harvey, like straight up Harvey, than he is as Two-Face, but he's still good as Two-Face. But just he's so suave and like so effortlessly plays this sort of smooth political figure who's also getting shit done. But then he does bring in that sort of darker side where I think it's really interesting when you have him and Bruce sort of as rivals, but they're both sort of secretly wanting to be each other. I think the character is perfectly written, and several people were offered this part, but I can't imagine anyone else but Aaron Eckhart. Like, he's not like an A-list actor or like an A-list celebrity actor, but I think I can't really imagine anyone else doing this role.
I think I saw that Matt Damon was offered it at one point.
Mm-hmm. Like Matt Damon's a good actor, but I don't see him here. Like he'd give a good take, but I don't think it would be as good.
It'd be interesting to see what it would. Sometimes when it's like he wouldn't be as good as Eckhart. What it comes down to, but I'd be interested in seeing it because I think it would be pretty good still. Eckhart nails it. He knocks it out of the park. He's kind of the underdog of all the characters in terms of how they're positioned in this movie because there was so much tied to the Joker, both in terms of marketing, in terms of hype. And obviously due to the circumstances behind the fact that Heath Ledger passed away before the film even came out, that Harvey was kind of an afterthought. Two-Face was certainly, while a major villain, was certainly not as infamous as the Joker. And anyone with the Joker in your movie, any other villain's always going to be second billed, both often literally and figuratively. But I think what this movie did, and specifically what Eckhart's performance did, was really solidify who Harvey Dent was as a person, why you should be sympathetic with him later on as a villain, and why I think the character of Harvey Dent is probably one of the most valuable in the Batman story, in the Batman universe, and often the one that is given less to do for reasons that are mostly unjustified. I think there is this obsession with Batman, with the concept of the rogues gallery. There's an obsession with this plugging in villains here and there to tell your story, but really, Harvey Dent is, in some ways, the most interesting character in Gotham, or at least one of. And any story about Batman should feature Harvey Dent prominently, certainly before he turns into Two-Face, but Two-Face should be more of an endgame type of situation, not something you build a story around, as we've actually alluded to. I can't believe Eckhart hasn't really done anything remotely of note since then.
Yeah.
He was just in Sully. I know Rabbit Hole got a lot of great reviews. He got a couple of nominations for it.
I see him pop up here and there. It's just why isn't he a lead in huge films?
Like, why is he a supporting character in the Has Fallen cinematic universe, which will continue on past Olympus Has Fallen and London Has Fallen to a third Has Fallen movie, apparently.
I can't remember what it's called. It's something dumb.
It's something very dumb, though. He knocks it out of the park. What more would you want from a movie? I mean, what more would you want from this performance? Yeah. Angel Has Fallen. It's going to be fucking dumb. It's an all-time comic book movie performance. It's an all-time action movie performance. It's also a complete arc one that is arguably rushed, but not as much in retrospect. Not as much as I think.
Yeah.
I think that's oversold.
One of the few common criticisms of this is that it shouldn't have had Two-Face appear in this film. That, like, he should have been Harvey. Well, I think the original David Goyer's plan was Harvey would be in this as Harvey, and then when Joker's on trial early in the third film, he gets his face burnt, and then his Two-Face. And some people have said, there's too much going on here where, you deal with Joker getting caught and then you have to get up again for a Two-Face showdown. And it's like, I can vaguely see where you're coming from, but I don't agree, because they were battling. Like, he's the most important character that isn't called Batman. Well, he's the most important character in this film. Like, Batman and Joker are fighting over him, almost. And, like, that's the whole plot. Like, it's called The Dark Knight, and they explicitly call Harvey the White Knight repeatedly. And, like, that's not an accident, that it's a mirrored idea, and that Batman has to assume this role as a villain to protect Harvey, because he was more important to the city than Batman is.
Yeah. Although it's funny, I actually just read today, I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently Nolan has said that he wished he wouldn't have killed him if he knew he was making it for a third movie.
Yeah.
But I think in a lot of ways it was for the best.
Yes. I'm sure he wished he had that character to still play with and that actor to still direct, but if you think of what it does to the story, his legacy, I think it's strong.
The issues with the third film do not have anything to do with how they treat Harvey Dent.
No.
And if anything,
giving him as the backbone of that film, or a large plot device in it, is great.
And the way they use his death in the third film is both thematically very interesting and also allows them to play with a lot of ideas and themes that they've been exploring throughout the films about this notion of justice and what is justice and power and who has it and how's it wielded. So I think it's actually for the best in retrospect.
Yeah, I agree. It's not like... I mean, you had Bane, you had the Return of the League of Shadows, like, you had plenty of villains there, and giving this character... Like, in death, he takes on even greater importance, almost. In the same way that Raish kind of did.
Yes. Their deaths linger on strongly in the third movie.
Yes.
Which is all the more reason I think we both kind of believe that Dark Knight Rises works better as a conclusion to the trilogy than it does as an individual film.
100%.
Yeah.
We're not even going to make an episode about Dark Knight Rises. There's our take.
Yeah, that's it.
I'll isolate that and put it out as 30 seconds of audio. He's great. I love sort of the dynamic between him, Batman, and Gordon, where he's sort of late to the party and they're both reluctant to trust him, but behind closed doors both like him a lot, and
they want to believe in Harvey Dent.
They do.
But it's funny in a certain way, like the fact that they take so long to believe in Harvey Dent is the reason why so much bad ends up happening. Because if Gordon believes, it's actually kind of brilliant in the sense that Gotham's corruption for so long is also its undoing here, and allows the Joker to come about in a very direct way here, because normally you wouldn't completely distrust your district attorney in a way where you thought, if he knows, the criminals are going to know. Mm-hmm. So because of that, Lau is able to escape with the money.
Yeah.
Lau escaping with the money means the mob has to go all in on Lau, and thus they become very vulnerable. Them being very vulnerable makes them more willing to trust the Joker. That gives them the Joker more power. It takes Maroni an hour to be like, whoops. Normally, like, they would not go all in on that, and at the very least, the Joker's influence on the city would have been lessened.
Yeah. Like Gordon's very small circle of trust, which is ultimately revealed to not even be as big as he thinks it is at the end when he's betrayed. But
that's something I didn't even fully see until just this moment through this conversation. So that's kind of brilliant in a lot of ways. Yeah. Or at least it's just effective storytelling. And once again, using the city of Gotham and its faults kind of brilliantly. And like how I said, Harvey is the key to the story. Now I think once again, an issue that was pretty much an issue in Batman Begins, and an issue here is how much Rachel is just an object for these characters. For in the first movie, it was mostly just Bruce. Now she's kind of an object between Bruce and Harvey to tell the story of Harvey.
Yeah, she does a bit less. Weirdly enough, she actually does less, considering they get a better actress in here, Maggie Gyllenhaal, to play her after Katie Holmes actually turned it down. And although she's acting the little better,
a lot better.
I'm saying the little she's given better is what I meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. She's acting a little better.
A lot better, yeah. Like, she was acting in a role where she was almost alone in the DA's office, and now Harvey is this hotshot DA, and she's like his assistant. So you take away like her thing almost, and she remains the romantic sort of carrot on the stick for Bruce, and they're sort of having a pissing contest over her. So it does weirdly take away from her. That's
certainly less than ideal when needs pointing out and scolding. But in the first one, I think her role is largely gone unchanged. The difference is that the district attorney is a political job, and you need to actually be elected. And I think what you'll see in at least American politics is a lot of times, a lot of people who who are more qualified don't have the political acumen to actually get that job and get stuck in those jobs. At least that's true. That speaks truly to the experience I've seen in American local politics. So it's not unrealistic, but it's also kind of shitty that I think once again it gets back to the story you choose to tell, and the story you choose to tell is not hers. But at least it's a character still, and a character making decisions. And the scene, it really, I think, is one of the most powerfully understated tragic moments. In at least a big movie, is when she realizes she's about to die.
Yeah. And when she's trying to talk him through it.
And she is so brutal, because I think you can so easily either put yourself in her shoes or put your partner in her shoes and know exactly how you or her would respond. Not to be heteronormative, but how your partner or yourself would basically would want to be doing the exact same thing if you were her there, and it's brutal.
And how it flips from they both know that Rachel will be the priority, and she's like, I know they're coming for me, but I want to be here for you, and then it's completely flipped on her where she's then okay, and then she's dead. It's like, oh god, very standard supervillain plot. Like, here are two people, choose. But the execution is wonderful. Having them on the phone to each other throughout, very powerful.
I think what this proves is that in an alternate timeline where Hollywood is good at presenting female characters, this type of presentation would not be part of a pattern of objectifying women in terms of not making them their story. You're like, oh, they did it again, but at least it's a great movie. Yeah. Ideally,
what's the term for this? Fridging, where women only exist in films to be killed or raped or hurt in some way to give the protagonist motivation.
I actually don't know.
I think it's called fridging. I don't know. There's a website that's like
sounds right.
Yeah.
This definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test. I can tell you that. I think once again she's the only woman in the movie. And Ramirez and Martha Wayne talk, but they're talking about Jim. So does that fail the Bechdel test?
There's that judge who gets blown up in the car.
Yeah. Ramirez gets punched. Martha gets to be a hostage. Yeah. So this movie, there's no other way to put it. He's a movie about men for men.
Yeah.
In terms of, there's really not much here but like I said, they overcome it in the sense that they're making a quality movie, at least. It's more annoying when you're dealing with a shitty movie and it's happening. Other than that, then you have Bruce, which I think you have some passionate feelings about that we have not quite gone over.
Okay.
You allude to them.
Sell me on Bruce in this film, because he's sure on the screen a lot, he's sure talking a lot. Batman does a lot of things. Bruce doesn't really seem to go on that much of a journey, and maybe that's on purpose. Maybe his journey is in the first film, and this is purely about his mettle being tested, his philosophy being challenged, etc., etc. But I'm frustrated by what feels like a regression of Batman or Bruce in favor of, like, obviously the Harvey story is amazing and I wouldn't want to lose it. And in this performance from Heath Ledger and the Joker, you know, you have a screen icon and whatnot, but just it feels dramatically lesser than what is presented in Batman Begins. And I know that's because that's an origin story, so you're bound to get less sort of pathos, but that coupled with, you know, the voice getting ridiculous, you know, his growling, snarling, whisper shouting, and I really, it's not that in any way Christian Bale is performing worse, like he's acting just fine. It's just, yeah, like I've said 3 times, I'm just tripping over myself at this point. I think it's a regression.
By regression, what do you mean specifically? I know you just went over a bunch of things, but how is it regressed?
He feels like a bit of an afterthought. Like he's made to look a bit silly at times, and I get the idea is he has this strict set of principles, everything's working routinely as he wants it to. Here's Joker, screw all your plans and principles, he goes in the face of them, learn. But even with that, it just feels like there's a lot less meat to him this time.
I think there's definitely less meat. I think when it comes to this kind of issue in general, my first thinking is, okay, are you doing less and not replacing it with anything, or are you just doing less because you don't have any ideas? And this feels a lot more like, much more like the former. Because I absolutely, unquestionably, Bruce Wayne, Batman, has less to do in this movie in terms of a journey compared to the first one.
Yes.
I think, as we just went over, Harvey's journey is so substantive and complete that that's not a bad thing right away. I don't think this is a regression in the sense. I think the main thing is we're coming at Batman from 2 different points of view. Where correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you felt frustrated with the portrayal of Batman on screen and that it's been limited and not really 3-dimensional. Would that be correct? Before Batman Begins.
Yeah, you get a lot of gadgets. You get a lot of punching. Like, obviously, he's in these ones. He's very sort of brutal and sort of in the shadows and scary. There's not a lot of the world's greatest detective aspect to him, and I really think that there should be a procedural detective show starring Batman that's made with a high budget on television every week, but never mind. I think he's made to look stupider than he's meant to be in these films, and I get it in the first one. He's inexperienced, like he's just starting out at this, but this is meant to be like a unrealistically intelligent man who has spent years studying various topics and thinks his way out of problems as much as he fights his way. And
okay. All right. You ready for me to counter now?
Sure. I mean, he takes forensics off a bullet that's shattered, but that's
a scene that I still don't understand. I've watched it 2 times. Yeah. Like it's like watching all of Inception, but in like 30 seconds, in the sense that, okay, let me try to understand it, and I hope by the next time I watch it, I still remember what it means. I think, yes, this is less about Batman thinking and being a detective, but that's not one. I think it's natural in the sense that a lot of this movie is reacting to someone who is theoretically incredibly unpredictable, even if it's clearly carefully planned to a T, everything he's done.
Yep.
And I think the fact that Batman is forced to react here instead of carefully plan everything makes for an interesting progression in that he has to react in the small, but then he has to reveal what he's been working on behind the scenes all along, which also then ties in so many thematic elements about justice and oversight and power that's going on throughout the entire Batman story. So you're pushing Batman as a character, both in the story for the audience in the sense that he doesn't have the luxury of planning anything. And we as an audience then are put in his shoes of reacting along with him because the world's greatest detective, his plan that's been working for the last 9 to 12 months, depending on your timeline, is now unraveling due to an unforeseen wrench in the gears. And I think that makes for incredibly compelling programming, or content, if you will.
Hashtag content.
Hashtag content. Hashtag brand. And I think it pushes Bruce Wayne to make an incredibly unethical decision that calls into question, in a lot of ways, everything we know about him. and also forces the audience, which I think his long plan with the crazy oversight sonar thing was that it's kind of serves as a Rorschach test for the audience. As a stupid 19-year-old, it didn't really jump out at me as weird that he did that. As a cynical 27-year-old, I'm kind of like, it's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
And
good window into Mike Thomas's life here.
yeah. So I disagree that less means regression. And I think, though, where we have to agree to disagree is that what you see as inherently inferior, regardless of even how much there's there. I see as a fascinating zag when you're expecting a zig.
I think there are sort of kernels of very interesting ideas here to play with. Like, I love the idea of Joker, like, flying in the face of everything he was prepared for, and, like, he's arrogant in his dismissal of him when he's talking to Alfred. And he tries to... He directly quotes Ra's al Ghul. He says, criminals aren't complicated.
Yes. And I thought that's something I literally only caught this time. Probably because I watched Batman Begins 5 times in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But I was just like, whoa!
Yeah.
That's interesting. I should be like Matt and write things down, but I won't. Hopefully he caught it.
I sure did. Yeah, and like that's and Alfred's almost scolding him for being so arrogant. Obviously things have gone quite well for him so far in his crusade. He hasn't encountered a huge amount of resistance. It's gone as planned, and now he's dismissing what could be a big threat. I think that is incredibly interesting. And talking about what he's pushed to with that machine, he says how he's like afraid of what he will have to become to fight people like this. And like that, yeah, that is all great. I just think it's all a little bit too at the peripheral, whereas Batman Begins sort of presents Bruce up front. And again, I don't want Harvey Dent to stop being the centre of this film. And I don't want to take away any of these Joker scenes that everyone talks about rightly. I just wish there were a way to do both of those things and keep Bruce more central instead of bits here and there for you to piece together. And like, yeah, if you sit down and look at Bruce's journey like we are now, you can create a through line that is compelling. But personally, when I watch that as a complete 2.5 hour thing, he feels, like I said, peripheral. Almost, and that's way worse than the next one. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, just in comparison, that to me is a weakness compared to Begins slightly.
Okay, so the next thing I'm going to push you on, so I think that just comes down to priorities. I think for you, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just want Batman more towards the center in general in movies called Batman.
Yeah, because there is a public perception that well, certainly a lot of people I know are like, oh, Batman's villains are really cool, but Batman's like okay, and I don't think that's true. Like, I think his villains are obviously incredibly cool. Like, he has the best cast of villains to work with there is in any medium, I think. But I think that the Batman character is equally as fascinating and can be more than just a punching machine who has a secret identity.
I feel like what you want or need from Batman is to address a perception that is really from a bubble that a very small bubble, from a not quite vocal bubble. And I think more Bruce Wayne in this story, I don't think it adds to the movie. Or you have to tell a completely different story because, I mean, what I should say is, how does this movie improve with more Bruce Wayne? What needs to happen for there to be more Bruce Wayne and to simultaneously make this movie better? Like, how, you know what I'm saying?
Are you asking me to write the scenes?
No, not like to write the scenes, but like,
okay.
What
I just think generally, if your protagonist
do you want a different story? Do you want the same story but more? Do you want a 2 hour and 45-minute movie? Do you want a 3 hour movie? No, because I'm being serious though. Because I think that my issues with this movie literally have nothing to do with that, and I think so. That's why I'm trying to get at it. I'm trying to push to find out what it is, so I can even get into the same place as you. Because from my perspective, it feels like you have an incredibly well-balanced movie where you have one main arc and you have like a 1B arc. Maybe it's a 1C arc. And this, like, maybe it's an extra notch down that delicately and nimbly balances two major character journeys being told in a movie that also is serving with a sequel. It also has another villain in it that obviously steals the show.
I guess I'm sort of approaching this from the perspective of like I'm married to the idea that a protagonist in a film is it like you can make the argument Nolan is telling a story about Gotham, he's not telling a story about Batman or whatever. And I guess I'm being slavish to the idea that your protagonist should be, sympathetic and interesting and big and prominent. And I got that in Begins, and I suppose there's no reason that has... I'm not saying he's unsympathetic or uninteresting, I just don't think he is interesting and sympathetic enough.
I think one of the key issues here with Batman that I think you possibly might be right about is this notion that he's ready to give up being Batman feels a little bit forced.
Mm-hmm.
It feels a little bit out of... You want to tell the story more than the story is telling that itself, It's like you want to end up in this place where he gives it up for something, but...
Could that be born out of the idea that Nolan wasn't attached to doing more than 2 of these films? And, if this was to be his last one, he would want to explore that before he went. Because, This is a year into being Batman. I know they're being more realistic with it, where, you see him covered in... the physical damage of being Batman, and you'll see in Rises when he gets X-rays that his body is destroyed, and maybe that is more realistic compared to 10 mostly uninterrupted years of being Batman or more.
And I do think that's valid also towards your point that a more lengthy, let's say 5-season vision of what a Batman HBO show would be like would be able to tell that story in a more organic, less forced way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the big lines I think about is Harvey's line being, well, who's ever Batman, he can't want to do this forever. I don't know. I don't know if someone would actually genuinely think that at that point in time. That didn't feel like something anyone would actually say.
Well, you would assume that whoever Batman is has a life to a larger degree than Bruce Wayne does. Bruce Wayne has nothing. All he is Batman. Without his mission to be Batman, he drinks himself to death. And you see it in the third film where he's literally grown a beard and is in his mansion dying, essentially. You can see why he wouldn't have a reason to give up being Batman, but maybe people are not, within Harvey's point, maybe he's not imagining the extremes of this man.
Yeah, but it just felt like, I don't think Batman, for the people of Gotham, based on what we've seen, was in any way human enough for anyone to even conceive of him as a person that needed to be empathized with.
Yeah.
And that's even a credit just to the film's success at making him in this icon almost right away in a very, once again, organic way that makes it unrealistic that anyone would even conceive of his actual emotions. It's that, so my point is that begins this whole idea that Bruce is trying to get out in a way and for reasons that never seem actually clear. When we open up the movie, Batman has no limits with Mr. Wayne. And then once again, the only justification is that Rachel made him this loopy promise that maybe one day I will be ready. You will come back to me.
Mm.
You will actually be the person that you once were. And I guess you could argue as he sees Rachel slipping away and going towards Harvey that's who he wants to be, but I think that's a lazy part. I think that's like a crutch.
Mm.
That's not maybe a crutch, but a shortcut to a journey of Batman. Bruce wants to give up Batman. I think the moment Rachel dies is the moment Batman decides, I'm going to be Batman until I die.
And yet he gives it up at the end of this film.
Yeah, that's my point, though. And I think that contradiction is very much there. But then again, I guess you could say he decided he needed to, and then it makes sense that he fell apart because now he has no Rachel and no Batman.
Yeah.
So that made sense, but I think there's a contradiction to the idea that I don't think Batman would be quite so quick to give up Batman.
Well, I mean, his justification is that Harvey's putting people away legitimately in larger numbers than he can by breaking the law.
Yes.
But
but even that has never been something I've been able to completely buy into. Because they're like, okay, let's say Like, what would Harvey, like, if they found out Harvey was corrupt, how would they all be released? Would there just be not someone who was more willing to take them on? I don't know. If that's possible.
I don't know.
But even that whole notion has always seemed a bit thin to me.
Well, I don't think it so much does anything to the arrests or the charges that have been made as much as it does to the sort of status quo of the city, the morale, the sort of perception that real change is possible, that good can strive when everyone else is bad.
Very possible.
And I don't know, maybe it's a series of complex things he's putting together that the judges have to go with him on this journey, and maybe when they're like, oh, he's a murderer, it's like, I'm less willing to do this now. Because he, surprise is expressed when a judge is willing to hear the case.
I think you're right in the sense that Bruce's arc is not as airtight as Harvey's, and I think that's a bigger issue than how prominent it is.
I think another thing is, these are the most prominent examples of Batman. In terms of sort of cultural penetration, it's the 60s show and it's these films. And realistically with young people, it's these films. These are like, this is Batman to people. And across these three films, I feel there's never one instance, really. I mean, maybe The Machine, but the sort of cerebral thinking detective Batman. And I know detection doesn't really lend itself to the film format in the way it does the TV one. Fine. But it's that across these three films, there's never really that depiction of him. And the idea that people are walking around thinking, oh, Batman is real good at hiding the shadows and punching people and being intimidating, that bothers me slightly, but that says more about me, I guess, than it does anything else. And that this trend of Bruce being less interesting continues, where you get to Rises and he's arguably like the fifth or sixth most important or interesting character in that film. I think because I perceive it as, he starts so high and begins, dips slightly here, and then dips way down in the third one. I hold it somewhat against this because, I don't know, it's the start of the trend.
Okay. I think that at least makes sense, even though I think we've talked about this with other movies, with X-Men at least, but things in future movies don't really hinder my enjoyment of the previous movies, I should say. I think I'm able to compartmentalize them a little bit. Yeah,
and that's completely fair, that, for some people, things can be retroactively tarnished, and for some people they can separate them. And that's 100% personal preference.
It's a worthy discussion to have, though, either way.
Yeah, I was just sort of longing for a version of Batman that was never quite presented. Other people are in this film, I guess.
Are they?
Yeah.
Who?
Well, there's Gary Oldman back as Jim Gordon.
First thing we got to point out here. What are the logistics of him faking his death? Who knows? How is just the right amount of people in on it? What is going on there? Because I'll be real, when he takes off his mask and it's him, I'm sure I applauded with everyone else in the theater in 2008. It was an awesome moment. But the logistics of how they got from A to B will never cease to be a mystery to me. And I can't remember if we actually talked about this on air or off the air, but as Nolan acquires more and more power and clout within Hollywood, the more he feels comfortable just making the giant plot holes that army tanks could drive through. This is a major hole as far as I'm concerned. It's a huge leap in logic to assume that at this point in time, he can reasonably trust no one besides Batman, correct?
Sure.
After all this time, so were all the other cops in on it? Was Batman in on it? Is Batman acting when he's telling everybody Jim Gordon died for nothing? Is he going through a club and exposing himself in that way for the show of it? Is Gordon doing this all by himself? What is going on here?
Well, it's implied literally only him and Batman know. And I think Harvey knows.
But did he...
Actually, I don't know if Harvey knows. I can't remember.
I would guess no, but I have no idea. But
no, I think Batman is active.
When his lieutenant checks his pulse and discovers a pulse because he's not dead and not in critical condition, clearly, does he not react? Does Gordon run away when people aren't looking? What's going on with his body at this time?
I don't know, I guess you write it off as sort of the chaos of that shooting at the mayor, and maybe his right-hand man, who is the guy that goes and tells Barbara Gordon that he's dead. Maybe he knows. I took that to be Harvey Bullock, and I assume they didn't name him because having two Harveys in one film is confusing. Yeah, maybe he knows.
Yeah. Anyway, I just don't. I think that plot hole is such a. It seems so unnecessary to have that leap in logic. I think it's a leap. It's a creative decision that does not age well, because in the moment it obviously leaves this tremendous applause, but then, it's 9 years later and you're only like, huh? What? Why?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, this is a holdover from Goya. Like, this is straight out of Long Halloween. The three of them working together, one of them pretending to be dead, blah, blah, blah. It's just less elegantly written, I think.
Yeah.
But, Gary Oldman generally, good.
Great. And as I think we talked about last time, I like how he's kind of in this fitter, ready for combat shape before his pudgier phase and softer phase and rises.
Longer hair, more take charge.
He's got at this point he's got so much clout that he can basically do whatever he wants at this point, and basically operating without any oversight. Clearly,
yeah. When he's head of the major crimes unit and has his own little team and his own little fortress and his own all these things.
I think that actually, in some ways, would actually be a very interesting. That Gotham Central comic book series.
Yeah.
That 9-month stretch where Gordon's got his way with everything would actually be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah. Well, you see it in the first one where he's very sort of... He doesn't agree with the corruption, but he's also not actively doing much. Like, he's passively just like...
Absolutely.
He doesn't like it, but he's not doing anything. In this one, he carries himself with confidence. Like, he marches into Harvey's office, and he's sort of very glib with him. And
it's a great way of showing the progression of Gotham, that Batman, Batman opened the door, and he needed people like Gordon to walk through it, and that's what's happened. That's interesting. Oldman's a fantastic actor. He nails pretty much every scene.
Yes.
Whatever, and he's kind of like the utility player in that, like, whatever emotion we need in this moment, he provides.
Yes. Gary, do things. Oh, okay.
Yeah. We need sadness. We need glib. We need anger. We need frustration.
Can you get slapped in the face? Can I?
No. There's something about his delivery of the line, "I need to save Dent," was at the very end when he and Batman have a quick divide on what the course of action should be in those final moments with the Joker. The music like kicks in right at that moment. I think there's I get goosebumps every time in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Oldman just a fantastic actor, and it's their gallery of Academy Award winning or nominated actors. That's the real gallery going on here in the Dark Knight trilogy, and it pays off all the time.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Michael Caine once again continues to act as the moral check to Bruce. Once again, is fantastic, and what would be his last fantastic performance as Alfred. Did the crying scenes suck in Rises? He's good for like the first 35 minutes in Rises, but anyway.
Okay. I like how at the beginning of this one it's sort of jovial prodding at him.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a more open, "You're wrong. Here are the problems with the black and white philosophy you've adopted," and he's borderline sort of saying "I told you so" when Rachel dies, but still, but while encouraging him to continue on, and like he's the one telling him not to give himself up to stop people dying.
And he has one of several there were several iconic lines in this movie, amazingly enough, which does not happen often.
Just want to watch the world burn.
It's amazing. You don't. Once again, this is something that doesn't happen with movies all that often. Like, here's looking at you, kid. As long as I live, I'll never go hungry again. Like, you associate those kind of iconic lines with movies from practically a century ago, and
Anchorman, but that's different.
Yeah, that's different. You don't even need to see Anchorman to get to use those lines. Yes. The some men just want to watch the world burn. A hero, live long enough to see himself become the villain. I think what's interesting, though, is that because it's so new and irony has become the preferred source of humor, is that, like, it's not cool to say those lines. but they're still iconic at the same time. Like, you have, if you're going to use those lines, you better be ironic with it, otherwise you look like a dork.
That's true. I do use "some men just want to watch the world burn" over like really small things to be not funny.
Yes, but at the same time, they're as iconic as a line can be that was intended to be not funny.
Yes, that's true.
Anyway, and the "some men just want to watch the world burn," that whole speech, while probably ridiculous, and thankfully Sony is not responsible for Batman, otherwise we'd probably have an entire spin-off trilogy devoted to the adventures of the man who makes gazpacho for Bruce.
Burning down jungles, murdering countless people and animals.
Yeah, that would be certainly what would happen if Sony had control. Yeah. But
why don't we have the Aunt May film, damn it?
I know. Aunt May as a spy. It was going to be great. In Alfred's decision to not give Rachel's letter to Bruce would obviously play a huge role in the final film.
Yes.
For better, but not for better, just for worse.
I do like, Rachel doesn't do a lot or has less agency, but I do like that she stands her ground with Alfred about Bruce's decisions.
Yeah. Morgan Freeman is back as Lucius Fox. He's kind of like in his own separate movie in a way.
There's the spin-off film you want to see. Lucius Fox's life as in Wayne Industries.
You could almost picture a sitcom about it. Like Christian Bale makes a 10-second cameo in each episode.
Does he walk into the rooms in increasingly silly ways?
It's like, I'm finally be able to get out at 4 o'clock this night. I don't have to make some stupid gadget. Oh, Bruce.
I need to get into a plane from the ground. I'm editing this out because if people hear it, they'll steal our idea.
Yeah. But he has to deal with the subplot of Mr. Reese. Yeah. Not Mr. Reese.
No, close.
It's the Riddler. Lucius Fox has to deal with an outside consultant figuring out who Batman is. That leads to a fairly unique sequence later in the film that I guess we can discuss later on. But Lucius Fox gets to once again serve as the moral compass, makes things for Batman, generally pleasant to watch.
Very quippy.
Gets his big moment, much like, I think, kind of in almost like a Bryan Singer fashion. Everyone kind of gets their moment. They're a part of the ensemble in some way. And he gets his moment at the end where he draws a line with Bruce.
Yeah. I love that he objects.
Yeah, especially, once again, very valuable, I think, because the problem with the Batman story in general is that you're popularizing this myth that fascism is a good correction towards a failed state. And probably not a good thing to popularize.
He's not a full-on fascist, but
it's pretty fascist. He's
not like jailing his enemy.
He's not a tyrant. He's not a tyrant.
No,
he's. But it's like fascist principles kind of being applied to
one above all. I know better. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. That needs to be checked a little bit. So thankfully, Lucius Fox is there to do that for our hero. But it feels very consistent with his character. Once again, there's that ensemble element that they managed to pull off seamlessly with Batman in a way that more superheroes should be able to be going with. You feel like you have this team trying to take the Joker down, and the team is slowly falling apart towards the end, but Lucius and Alfred managed to make it to the very end. A few other notable castings. Anthony Michael Hall, of all fucking people, plays a newscaster who gets... a couple of key scenes for the plot to deliver. Eric Roberts plays Sal Maroni. Apparently, Bob Hoskins and James Gandolfini also
failed to get this part.
Yeah. I feel like they didn't go with Gandolfini because they didn't want it to feel like The Sopranos. I feel like you don't, literally the greatest performance as a gangster in the history of anything ever. Whoa. You would think. Yeah, suck it, Al Pacino. You would think... that would merit a 10-minute bit part in The Dark Knight, but maybe they didn't want it to be a distracting performance.
But Julia Roberts' brother was available, so...
Listen, he was almost a big deal in the 80s.
Yeah. I think he's good here. He's very sleazy.
No, he's good. Like I said, it's another thing. He and Tom Wilkinson are delivering performances in movies that are completely different than the movie we're watching as Falcone and Maroni, and it's Falcone.
You just said them together. You must feel how ridiculous that sounds.
Falcone and Maroni. Speaking of sitcoms, that should happen. Hey, you just stole my corner. This is where I sell my drugs. Hey,
Skip, hey.
We're going off the rails.
Much
One
like
of my
franchise.
favorite supporting actors from Lost plays the mayor, Nestor Carbonell.
Yeah, he does.
In the role of mayor. Yeah, Nestor Carbonell was awesome on Lost. He provides a welcome. He's a welcome addition in any movie as far as I'm concerned. I'm glad he got to be part of this in Dark Knight Rises. Chin Han plays Lau with an appropriate amount of fake confidence and sleaze, or unearned confidence and earned sleaze.
He gets called a television. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was a good line. And he really, he's good. He's good in the role. Cillian Murphy returns for a cameo as a scarecrow, which was a very effective way of making the universe feel more lived in.
Shows how Gotham's changed as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, criminals like him now are actual criminals and not hiding in plain sight. That's cool. Richie Coster playing the Chechen is once again in a completely different movie than the one we are watching.
He's oddly charming. I don't even know what it is, but little things like trying to continue eating while he's getting arrested.
Apparently, he's doing a really hammy Robert De Niro impression. I feel like I remember reading that at some point. Colin McFarlane returns as Loeb, the now ex-commissioner, as he was blown to pieces. Or no, his mouth was melted or something. I don't know.
He drank poison.
Linda McGraw, Don Draper's, what's the word? Mistress of the season. Season 4, I believe.
Maybe.
Don Draper had a mistress seemingly in every season.
He has a mistress?
I know, right?
Whoa.
Michael J. White popping up as Gamble.
Fuck yeah.
William Fichtner popping up as the bank manager. Love Fichtner. Love Armageddon.
Yep.
Terrible movie. Makes me cry every time.
Fuck yeah, it does. You don't cry at the end of Armageddon, you're made of stone. Ron
Dean plays Wirtz. Monique Gabriella plays Ramirez. Both are roles that are feel oddly improminent early on, in the sense that why do these people have lines? And you're like, oh, that's why they have lines.
Yes.
So we remember who they are.
And her mother is in the hospital.
Yes. So natural, such a real conversation they would have in that moment.
Tom Tiny Lister.
Oh, I forgot about Tiny Lister. Yeah, he's got a big moment.
I like his moment. I like that
I like that it's not a character we know.
Yeah.
Because it would have felt really forced and a little too novelistic that if it was literally it all ties together. Keith Sargita plays the fake Harvey Bullock.
Yeah.
In a role he mostly has to stand around. He gets J-broned by the Joker, and also he looks exactly like the person who tries to run over Mr. Reese with his car later on, so that was always very confusing to me.
Yes.
I was like, oh, that guy switched sides. Oh, no, wait, what?
No, okay. I'm just a nerd.
Yeah. He's paying way too much attention.
That's where you've been going wrong all this time.
That's about it.
Yeah. There's a small Australian bit part actor who's in here. You may remember him from 10 Things I Hate About You. Yes. Yeah.
He was in the TV show Roar.
A Knight's Tale.
Classic.
Yeah. The Brothers Grimm? Is that him and Matt Damon?
His final iconic performance was, of course, in the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. But yes, since Matt decided to bring him up like a Kodo geek, Heath Ledger is in this movie playing the Joker. It is iconic. He won 1 billion awards for it. All future Joker performances will be compared to this performance of the Joker.
Yeah, Jared Leto had no chance.
All future portrayals of the character of the Joker will be judged based on how he was portrayed here. This is the standard for the Joker. It blows away Jack Nicholson. I don't think there's really anything to debate about that.
I'm stunned that this is a debate, that people are like, oh, it's so iconic, Nicholson. It's like, yeah, it existed in a prominent film.
Yeah. Eckhart delivers the most important role. Christian Bale continues to be excellent, even if he has less to do here. Heath Ledger's Joker was the big thing everyone took away from this movie, and I don't think there's anything we could do now to cheapen that. I don't think just because that everyone else is great in this movie that there's anything to knock about Heath Ledger's work in this one. There's only a single moment in this movie where you see him. I don't mean like literally see his face, but yes, there's one moment where you actually see the real Heath Ledger's face and not just the makeup. There's only one moment where he has the makeup on where I'm like, oh, that's Heath Ledger. I don't know if you had that same feeling, but it's in the interrogation scene when he's surrounded by dark.
Yeah.
There's something. His face just comes. You see Heath Ledger behind the makeup.
Yeah,
really for the only time. It's eerie, if anything, and kind of haunting. It's like kind of random. You don't know why. Why in that moment does it seem like him so much? There's something must be.
I don't know.
Something visually about that. Yeah. I think I went into this viewing to like kind of focusing on Harvey because I really wanted to discuss the story of Harvey because I do truly think it's brilliant. I think we got the definitive Harvey Dent and the definitive Joker in this movie. I don't think it's a fool's errand to try to top this. You have to go in a different direction. I think is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, and they did, and it got shat on. So,
yes.
What can you do? We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I still haven't even seen that yet, so I can't even comment on it. But
you're gonna hate it. I know it right now.
I assume so.
You're gonna be like, there's not one thing in this film that's good, and I'm gonna be like, but the first half is kind of like pretty, and you're gonna be like, no, Matt, fuck you.
I don't care what it looks like. Go read my fucking Doctor Strange review. I do not care what things look like.
That's true. I can verify that. What can you say?
It's funny. I think with Heath Ledger, in a lot of ways, he was a part of so many iconic movies for me as a kid that I felt a real not connection is probably too strong of a word, but there was something special about him to me for a really long time before he struck it as a credible award-winning actor. And I was still still very much deeper into film love than I am now when his death happened. I'll actually never forget. I was a freshman in college, so first year of college for all you non-Americans. And as a tradition, like people had those like dry erase boards outside their dorm rooms, and someone wrote, as I was actually going to watch some movie for a racism film in film class. I can't remember which one it was, but it was pretty early, obviously. Someone just wrote "Rest in Peace, Heath Ledger," and I'm just like, "What the fuck?" That's how I found out. Very weird.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I hate that he's gone.
Yeah.
I'm actually getting sad right now just thinking about it. It hits me a few times a year that he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was on his way to having one of the most spectacular careers in film history.
Yep.
I think the fact that he was willing to try different things all the time, like the fact I just went to his IMDb page, and the fact that he basically only has 16 credits makes me sad all over again because I didn't even realize it was that few.
And like what Nolan says about him, about the reason he cast him because he has no vanity. That's so true. Like he just gives himself to roles. And
like that always sounds like kind of an obnoxious thing to talk about. Or like it just like, oh, he has no vanity. He fully dives in. But I think even more than that, there was just this. It was both just you didn't feel like he was an actor. You felt like he was a performer. Like you felt like he became the character, which I think is slightly less obnoxious way of saying it. But like I look back, like 10 Things I Hate About You, one of the most iconic movies of my childhood. The Patriot, the first movie that while I was completely wrong about in terms of its genuine quality, still made a huge impact on me. And I
think that's everyone. Everyone, like, their first viewing of The Patriot is like, oh, it's a really good film. And then you look back on it and you're like,
And I think it's an interesting movie to study in so many ways, because it's so condescending in some ways, but at the same time so compelling, but yada, yada, yada. Like the fact that that's yet another movie where he dies is so... Actually, it's probably one of the few movies that he dies in that I'm looking back at it. Oh, what's even so fucked up is that like a month later in that racism in film class, we watched Monsters Ball where he fucking kills himself halfway through. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Because I did not know that was coming at all. That was really dramatic, actually, now I think back about that.
Do I need to put on my psychiatrist outfit
probably.
Here? Let's dive into the id of Mike Thomas.
Yeah. I remember, like, I dragged my dad to A Knight's Tale. We both loved it at the time, and I didn't know the dumb fun. Monsters Ball. Yes, it's a fun movie, which is important. And then He kind of goes through this 4-year gap between that and Brokeback Mountain, where his career does not take off in the way everyone expected. The Four Feathers was an infamous flop. I still haven't seen it. I should, just because it's him.
Yeah.
Ned Kelly didn't make really any impact. The Order was a flop. Lords of Dogtown was a very small role. The Brothers Grimm was a flop.
I paid money to see that film.
Did you know?
I did. I had a very wide open Friday night.
Casanova was a flop. Came out the same year as Grim Dogtown and Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah.
Brokeback Mountain obviously kind of put him on a new level. People who didn't take him seriously before all of a sudden are taking him seriously. It was a fantastic performance and a fascinating movie. And then from there, he dies 3 years later. And he pretty much, he's a part of I'm Not There, but that's obviously such the main character is played by 8 different people.
Yes.
Dr. Parnassus, once again, in terms of haunting, fucked up images, that movie, have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
The first scene is him, hanging by the neck off the London Bridge. And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Couldn't they have found... I think there's something tragic about the fact that, someone as talented as him, who clearly had drug issues early in his life, and, basically probably... not that I'm a fucking doctor, but I'm guessing his body was susceptible to sleep medication taking away his life.
Yes.
And that's what happened. And
I think he had pneumonia or something as well. He'd filmed something where he was in water for a long period of time, and
it makes me so incredibly sad.
I try to, but I can't imagine a world where I'd love to be able to imagine it, but a world where he lives and is celebrated for this film. I'm sure plenty of people that saw it told him this was amazing, but a world where we all publicly fall at his feet and he can see it. And he gets role after role from it, and we see where he goes to. I want that, but I can't see it. It's unfortunately his death is intrinsically forever tied to this part, and people, complete dumbasses, want to create fiction.
Oh, he died for this role. It drives me nuts.
Oh, he was living in a hotel room, and he thought he was the Joker, and it made him suicide. No,
I know. I usually try to not delve into those kind of arguing with perception because it's a fruitless and also often misguided adventure. But whenever I see some dumb comment like that, I'm just tempted to just get into a giant argument about it.
Yeah. He finished this film and was going on with his life, and was just so dumb.
Yeah, the Joker so far is definitely the most fun I've ever had with the character. He's just out of control, no empathy. He's a sociopath, a psychopath, mass murdering clown, and I'm just thoroughly enjoying it. Yeah, the role killed him. It just drives me absolutely nuts because I think it's such an insult to his memory.
Yeah.
And not that I knew him or anything like that, but just
no, I get that same reaction, and not. I don't want to insult his memory, but I think another thing to remember about this is, if you can cast your mind back to when he was announced as Joker, that was not met with universal praise. A lot of people didn't know he had this in him.
No.
And I think whenever you see a superhero cut, when Ben Affleck was announced as Batman, and people uproar and everything like that. I think you need to have some perspective and look back at this and remember how much resistance this was met with and how well it turned out. And to a much lesser extent, Michael Keaton was heavily protested, and some crazy people think he's the best Batman. So he's got that working. Hugely
protested, and it's largely seen as the only worthwhile thing about the movie that just came out.
It's fine.
Just let the performance happen and judge it for itself. But what's funny with Heath Ledger, and actually kind of similar to Affleck, is that they had lost a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
Restored that credibility, and then that credibility was spent on Batman in some ways.
But
I doubt Heath Ledger looked at it that way, but I think.
Well, the same with Affleck. Argo, obviously very well received. How many average Joe people went to see something like Argo? How many people looked at Brokeback Mountain and were like, no thank you? And how many people still walked around with this perception in their head that Ben Affleck is making dumb fail films and Heath Ledger is that pretty boy who did that string of unsuccessful films, but then you do something like Batman that like everyone sees. And,
yeah, I don't know. It's there's something so haunting about this performance, and there's also something eerie about it being his last big performance, and yet you don't feel like you're watching Heath Ledger at any moment. This isn't Heath Ledger. This is simply just the Joker. But
no, it's good. Like every presentation of Joker is far more like over the top, and like not that this isn't larger.
It's over the top, but it's grounded in the reality that Nolan established somehow.
Yes, exactly, and like he's sort of dirty and grungy. And I also like the moment in the I like both of them, but the two hostage videos. In that first one, when he has that like dramatic shift where he's like, "Look at me," and it's like, "Look at me," like this really deep, violent thing.
Yeah,
and I love this idea that like the playtime is only for him, and you aren't allowed to enjoy it. He's having all this fun, and then if you don't take him seriously, he turns.
I also kind of like, obviously, the Joker is the inverse of Batman. That's why it's thematically important. Like that kind of stuff is usually obnoxious, but also to me has often rang hollow. Even in something like the Batman animated series, which I love, obviously, but I don't. The Joker does not feel as substantive as he does here. And even if there's no merit to any of his philosophy in a lot of ways, there are certainly moments of truth in there. Not to mention the truth that, what I consider to be the fact of, if Batman was entering the criminal justice world and had to be a crazy person to finally shake it out of its slumber, the Joker, basically the criminal underworld is flipped on its back by Batman, and now it's the one backpedaling in its slumber, not what it once was, and now the Joker has to be this crazy person in his mind to free it. And I think that actually does ring true for once, that whole Batman and Joker are the inverses of each other. And I think that's something to think about, something to commend the film for being able to capture.
And so many strong scenes, like the interrogation, in the cell when he starts clapping, and
the moment. And then countless small moments, like how many of your friends have I killed? You've killed 6 of my friends. And he mouths 6. Yeah. Like, it's so darkly comedic in that moment.
Yeah. All these weird little touches, like throwing champagne out of the glass before he tries to drink it, and like combing his hair back with a knife when he's like such a visual wreck while he's saying hello beautiful, like sarcastically trying to make himself look good for her.
I think while so many versions of Joker have tried to hit the nail on its head with, I'm going to make a joke out of everything, and they'll talk about how much they're making a joke out of everything. He makes a joke out of everything without saying it in a way that feels much more. It actually feels like a true satire in some ways, without it being a satire, if that makes sense. Like he's making a satire out of life in a way that doesn't feel dumb. And it's also one of the few villainous characters in history where I am completely glad there's not a single redeeming element to him.
Yeah, I hate people that worship the character and I want Joker to win. It's like, you're an idiot.
That's
not what that's there for.
Walter White is more likable than the Joker, and
Walter White is a complete
awful.
Yeah,
if you're not rooting for Gus in season 4, you're a terrible person.
Fucking poor Jesse, man.
I think,
and that's why you need Harvey.
Only thing
as well.
Yeah, and that's why Harvey's story is what keeps us together. Otherwise, I think people would tempted to watch this movie and be like, I want more of the Joker. And I think any more of the Joker would have been too much Joker.
Yes.
For the sake of the story. Even if an extra scene would have been very entertaining, I think the story does less with more, and I think that's what it needs.
Yeah. What do you actually get out of Batman, besting him in a fist fight at the end, and then that's it? Nothing.
And that's another thing. I love how Joker is just this chicken shit bad guy who has no intention, openly and literally has no intention of getting into a fist fight with Batman.
Yeah. Throwing his men at him, and
he throws his henchman in front of him and then kicks him from behind, hits him with a bat, sacrifices dogs. he is the devil incarnate as close as there ever will be.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing redeemable about him in the slightest, beyond the fact that there are elements of truth to what he says at times. And I think a line that has not become quite as iconic as others, and thus naturally is actually probably better and more powerful and speaks to more truth, is the conversation about plans and how when everything goes to plan, nobody cares. For instance, the U.S. dropping bombs in some Middle Eastern country, no one gives a fuck. One crazy person killing a little blonde girl in Aruba that's American.
Yeah.
Everyone loses their minds. And I think while a lot of Joker's philosophies can be easily discarded as silly like 101 philosophy that tricks a lot of dumb people, a lot of dumb fans into thinking the Joker was really powerful and intellectual. I think that is actually a truly important point that does not get crystallized enough in enough portrayals of the media. And I think there was something worthy about him pointing out the hypocrisy, and not in terms of in terms of that telling that story was a worthy story to tell. That's my point.
Yeah, I like him more, less as a philosophical espouser of ideas and more as just, he is a brick wall that Batman hits in terms of his ideology and how he operates, and like how he's savagely beating him in the interrogation room, and he genuinely doesn't care.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now what have you got now?
I think actually what's kind of funny is that Batman at that point thinks that's all he still needs to do.
Yes.
Is that he's been facing a lot of dumb people now for a year, and he doesn't really need to outthink them. This is the first time he really needs to outthink them. It's like when you get comfortable at a job and all of a sudden your brain stops being stimulated by it because you're just doing the same thing over and over. Once you've learned how to do it. This is Batman. He has to learn how to do something new. And in that sense, I think it's appropriate that you don't see the 9-month journey in between, because the change in job, if you will, the change in position is far more interesting than the day-to-day out. But like I said, the Joker, I think, in a lot of ways does show who these characters really are at moments. I think that is a worthy story to tell. And it's told in both an interesting and incredibly entertaining way.
Yeah, he is a very, very interesting plot device for Batman writers, I think.
Yeah.
The one scene in the film that I remember about Joker more than any other, like all these iconic lines, is oddly enough when he's in the police car after he breaks out, and it's just sort of swerving, and he's leaning out the window, and there's like no sound. I don't know why that one sticks to my mind so much, but that's so the character to me.
Important to point out, because I think on the fringes of the story or of the entire story of Batman, is what we do with the people, with criminals. Like, the theme of what justice is obviously one of the biggest themes that is present throughout all 3 movies, right down to the very origins of Batman with Joe Chill. Like, what is justice? Is keeping this man in prison justice? Is killing this person justice? What is actually justice? And we see the Joker attempt to point out the hypocrisy of that at the end. I don't know. Did you think, did it feel forced that no one blew up either ship?
I mean, it feels like
But I'm saying, like, do you think that in that moment no ship blows up by either like, does the other ship blow up the other ship?
Yeah. I think one of them would blow the other up 100%, but that's not the story. That's it. Like, you can't just tell this like really bleak tale. Like,
I know, but that's my point. Is, does that payoff feel earned?
I think so, because otherwise, like, Joker's 100% right, and like going about proving him wrong in that moment, and saying that Batman isn't fighting for nothing, and that the general people of Gotham are actually better than the criminals give them credit, I think is important.
I mean, I agree that your story is not complete if they blow up. I'm saying, do they earn the moment, though, when they don't blow it up? You've seen The Usual Suspects, right? Yeah. If Kaiser Soze was, Susie Amos the whole time, you'd be like, what? Like, because if they actually do the due diligence, and that twist at the end, when you look back on it, still makes sense all this time.
Yeah. But it's not like that. Like, this is more like a justification of the hero's journey almost.
I know, but that's my point. It feels more like something that feels necessary based on the author's idea of what the story is and not the story they actually told, or the way they've established the universe.
I guess, yeah.
But anyway, the humanization of prisoners in that moment, in that scene, is vitally important to the themes of justice in this trilogy, and also sets up why Gotham City is not the beacon of light that it thinks it is by the time the Dark Knight Rises comes around. And how faulty this notion of just imprisoning everybody is your solution to your problems. We've seen in America, specifically, how much of a terrible error that is in judgment, and how a complete failure of society as a whole to think that is the solution to your problems. And it's a complete misunderstanding of crime and how crime happens and why crime happens. And Gotham is spared in this moment, and appropriately enough, it is not spared in the next one.
I do like that, Joker is a person presented to us as so secure in his beliefs that like his philosophy is correct. Everything he does turns out how he expects it to, and then in that moment he's proven wrong, and he does genuinely look very shocked that it's gone that way.
And it's really this awesome moment of faith being broken.
Yeah.
Even if just for a moment.
You sort of see it unravel a bit. And like we've talked about how you don't want Joker to be a person, really. Like they take that thing from Killing Joke with the multiple choice origin story, where he's got 3 different stories about how he got the scars and whatnot. But in that one moment, you do kind of see it. Like if this is all a performance and he is underneath actually a person, you kind of almost see it there. But then he snaps back to, oh, I got Harvey. I
think that gets one last thing we have to discuss is, so I think definitely from the story they were trying to tell, that conclusion was natural in terms of like, we want to end on this test for Gotham. Did it feel like somewhat of a letdown after everything the Joker had done in the previous 2 hours? Was the stuff with the boats it feels feel smaller than,
it definitely does.
Blowing up a hospital.
Yeah, it feels a very sort of by the numbers villain plot. Like, oh, here he is in this building. Oh, there's bombs over here. Batman wins.
Something about that has always felt like a step down moment. It felt a little anticlimactic for some reason for me. But I guess that points to the fact that the real climax is with Harvey Dent.
Yes.
At 250 52nd Street, in the ruins where Rachel died. Poetic, if you will. It rhymes. Harvey at this point has decided that these 3 men who came together a mere 2 hours ago to fight crime, this is where their journey must end together. And he flips a coin.
I mean, if all the coin flips go different ways, they all get to walk away.
Well, either way, justice will prevail because justice is blind and justice is 50-50.
Chance is the only thing that's fair.
Yes.
Which doesn't actually make sense. But
no, not at all. But, he's been through a traumatic ordeal.
I found his singling out of Gordon as a bit much. I get why he'd hate Batman, I get why he'd hate the detectives involved, but he seems to make such a big thing of Gordon that it felt a little bit out of place to me.
He fixates on Gordon
in
a way that seems a little unnatural.
Uh-huh.
But, once again, traumatic experience, mind addled.
Yes. Half of face exposed.
And he shoots Batman, oddly enough, gives himself the second coin toss. Doesn't really make any sense.
Go first or last, bro. Don't do it.
Second one's kind of a weird move.
He just really wanted to shoot Batman.
He goes on the third. Batman tackles him in a scene that visually I do not think conveyed what they wanted to convey upon first viewing.
Not quite.
Because the notion that he was dead at the end seemed baffling to me. It's like, they're like a story above the ground. How is he dead? Like, how is he so dead that he can't even move? There's no, what? But I guess they are much higher off the ground? It's really hard to tell what's going on in this scene. They don't make it clear at all.
Because then Gordon and Batman kind of teleport down to him as well.
Yes. Then the son gets down there somehow. The mother and the daughter, long gone. It's very...
What is the geography of Gotham?
The visual presentation of the scene, I think, it can only be described as a failure?
Yeah,
Maybe that's a strong word.
They fail what is narratively happening and what they're giving as actors in that moment.
The only thing I can think of is they're hedging their bets on whether or not they want to keep Harvey alive.
Well, with Nolan saying he wasn't sure he was coming back, and if he had, he would have kept him alive, it creates some doubt there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I say that kind of like devil's advocate. I don't really believe that. I think it was just poor shooting.
Aaron Eckhart was asked, "Are you returning?" And I think he was standing next to Nolan, and he said something like, "Well, am I?" And he jokingly was like, "Maybe," and then we're like, "No, absolutely not."
And maybe the only thing I think is maybe that was a Warner Brothers request, being like, please make this less definitive, so we have the option of keeping him alive. But again, I mean, this is just rampant speculation. Remember, at this point, obviously Heath Ledger was not dead, and they were free to use Heath Ledger in a third film, even if they wanted to. Even in the back of Nolan's mind, he was like, I still could tell a story. Either way, Harvey dies. Batman takes the fall. Batman is now the leper. He is now the outcast. He has been cast out. Very
Just
quickly.
like that man said.
Yeah. It's poetry. It rhymes.
He's a cop killer, man. He killed those cops, allegedly.
That were dirty cops. Yeah. Thus, he killed Harvey for some reason. That seemed I guess everyone just believed that.
Yeah.
It's weird. It feels a little forced. It's always felt a little forced to me.
I mean, it holds true to the idea that he's a symbol, not a man, and he can assume responsibilities and roles that no one else can, and all of that. But yeah, if that is potentially the end of the Batman story, if Nolan doesn't come back, he's telling an arc that ends with Batman becomes the villain and he's hunted for the rest of his days. When traditionally you see him hunted at the beginning and then he earns the trust of the cops, and that's the Batman tale. But they go almost the opposite way.
Which I actually kind of like. I think that doesn't... I don't think that's a negative, but it's certainly notable.
But ending on the note that your protagonist is, in the eyes of everyone in the world, the villain. And then not being able to demonstrate any positives coming... In a world where this is the last of the Nolan films.
Yeah, I know.
Where you don't get to see the outcome of that as positive. It's like, so he potentially did all this, is public enemy number one, and it doesn't matter?
I think that's actually okay. I think that's... I kind of like that, but I'm also kind of touched in the head. So
tweaked.
I like endings that flip expectations on their head a little bit.
Like when Dr. Manhattan when Ozymandias had already destroyed all those cities. Man!
Yes, my memory of Watchmen is excellent. I know everything that you're talking about.
I like Watchmen.
But explain it for the audience, because the audience doesn't remember well. The audience has a bad memory of Watchmen.
Well, he's monologuing his plan, but he'd actually already done it. And it's like, Doug, that's
Twist.
So smart of you.
Twist.
You are the smartest guy alive.
But I actually kind of like that, and in some ways I think the only thing about it that you don't like is that you leave that movie thinking, like, can't wait for the third one. The notion that they wouldn't make a third one after that would be kind of startling. Well, and I think also kind of notable, this is the last near universally praised version of Batman, or portrayal of Batman.
Or anything connected to the DC universe.
Pretty much.
No, definitely.
Pretty much. At least on the big screen.
Yes.
I think we will look back on this as the peak of Batman on the silver screen. I mean, whether someone agrees or disagrees with that, I think objectively it will never reach a higher peak than this.
There is not, there are not better Batman films than these two that Nolan made.
And
at all, it's not even close. If we're ranking these at the end of the day, we should almost invent our own Batman films to occupy spots between these two and the others.
Yeah, well, Dark Knight Rises is the third. But I think what I'm trying to say is just that in terms of that, even more so than Begins, this is the peak in terms of it is popular, it is beloved.
Yeah, like the cultural penetration
praised,
this achieved is insane.
While at the same time being beloved. Near universally. I don't like it will never it will never be higher than this. We
talked about it at the beginning, but I can't think of anything that was like that penetrated culture this much and was this beloved. Like there are popular films, there are films that do well, but nothing that is like as much of both as this.
Yeah. And while I don't think any serious film buff would call this the movie of the century, in terms of it being the best movie, I don't think any movie has made the impact that this one has in this century.
No, not at all. For a while, I said it was my favorite film of post 2000, but that's not true anymore. But also, yeah, like it's. I think it's the most important film in decades.
Yeah, and not just like it has this like powerful message that the world must see, but more just in that it balances critical acclaim, cultural penetration, box office success in a way that is nearly impossible for a film to achieve.
It's big, it's expensive, it's a blockbuster, it's good, it did well, it has a legacy, and it ruined other films because they attempted to copy it.
Yes.
That's all you're looking for.
Oddly enough, it inspired... I don't think Christopher Nolan intended to inspire copycats, Matthew. No. That's not what I meant when he meant to inspire people. But copycats is what they got, and they're all fucking wearing hockey pads, and they all fucking suck.
What's the difference between you and me?
End podcast episode. Right there. Do it.